We're getting ready to talk about the largest IPO in Colorado history, our own Ibotta! More claps than that. Let's get something. Let's get it going. Let's get it going. Thank you for being with us all day today at the Ignite stage. Denver Startup Week 2024 has been absolutely awesome. If you haven't registered for events tomorrow, I encourage you to go through the calendar and schedule to go through all of the awesome events. We've got another jam-packed day of awesome content, but we're going to end today's discussion with one of the best entrepreneurs in Colorado history, Brian Leach, and he's going to be introduced by a partner from Foundry Ventures, our famed venture capital firm out of Boulder, Colorado, Jacqueline Hester. And so I'd love to invite Jacqueline up to the stage to introduce Brian, and we'll go ahead and get this show started. Jacqueline?
I'm going to skip the podium. Brian, just come up.
Awesome.
Okay, hello.
What's up, everybody? Let's do this. Year 12.
Nice to see everyone. Standers, feel free to come sit in the front. Show of hands, entrepreneurs, founders in the group. All right. There's also like a VC pitch thing right now, so
Okay, awesome.
the smarter folks are going and raising money. And then people who are thinking about a track in entrepreneurship or starting a company. All right, everybody's already in, already on the ride. Awesome. So I'm Jacqueline. I'm a partner at Foundry. We famously did not invest in Ibotta, but that was before my time. So I totally
We
would
tried 3 times.
had I met Brian today. I was not there at the time. But we are huge fans of Ibotta and what Brian and Ibotta have really done for the Denver and Colorado startup community, and putting us on the map with the largest IPO ever in Colorado history.
Tech IPO.
The largest tech IPO ever in Colorado history, although ChatGPT will just tell you it's the largest, so you can take it, in April of this year. So kind of fresh off going public. We have a public company CEO who took time out of his day to be here with us, so super appreciative of that. Brian, I think it's always helpful to start with origin stories, and yours is particularly, I think, inspiring and interesting because, a lot of companies that get started, you've got a founder who's working on a job and they have a problem and they feel like they need to solve it, and so they leave to start that company. And investors like that founder market fit, and it's a sort of natural story. Your story is very different, in which you decided to leave an early but pretty storied legal career. I also decided to do that, but mine was not storied. And take a plunge and decided that you just wanted to start a company and you were going to figure out what to start. And so maybe there were ideas while you were still practicing, but you took a huge, left a really strong trajectory as an attorney, as a litigator, and decided to, I want to be a founder, I'm going to go start something. So talk a little bit about that, and how you had the courage to do that, and the journey of deciding you wanted to be a founder to actually starting the company.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. Thanks for everybody coming. I appreciate it. We were here 12 years ago when this organization, Denver Startup Week, began, and it's really cool to be back. And I want to thank also my colleagues Sunit and Luke who came. And if you want to talk to people who've been here, Luke's been here just as long as I have as well, so we'll stick around and say hello afterwards. But to answer your question, yeah, look, I grew up the son of an entrepreneur. My father, when I was born, was working at a car dealership in downtown Nairobi. And he moved to the United States so he could pursue his American dream, which was to start a company. And he quit his job as a consultant at McKinsey and started a company in a storefront in Perimeter Mall in Atlanta. And I grew up watching that. And I actually worked at the company, and I saw tech stand up, and I saw them grow to 1,400 employees. And my junior year in high school, they went public. So I had a front row seat to the energy and excitement of startups. And believe it or not, what caused me to go to law school was a combination of a failure of imagination and watching A Few Good Men with Tom Cruise. I actually thought it might be like that because I didn't know any lawyers. Well, I ended up becoming a lawyer, as Jacqueline said, and I did it for a little while, and it was nothing like the movie. And that was very disturbing because there was far more research and writing and far fewer cross-examining Jack Nicholson moments than I thought there would be. And I missed the idea, the idea was to do something that was high value above replacement, and lots of people could be great lawyers, partners at law firms. International arbitration was my field, and I was sort of a monolingual, basic white guy living in Denver, trying to do international arbitration, and just not feeling like that was going to be super distinctive. And I also felt like it wasn't a very creative job. It was much more analytical, kind of left brain job, and I just wanted more of the creative side. And so you're right, I started casting around thinking of what could I do differently, and I came up with a series of just truly atrocious business ideas like, let's do LinkedIn, but just for doctors. Or let's do mint.com only just for Mac. These were terrible ideas. Those are the two of the better ones, actually. And eventually I was coming back from a conference, an international arbitration conference in Brazil, and this woman was taking pictures of her receipts from the conference to submit for reimbursement. And I just started thinking about all the data that's on a receipt and how interesting it would be if we could somehow control our own purchase data, have information about all the things we bought, hence Ibotta. And so that led to the idea of, well, you could tailor promotions and change advertising to kind of shape brand loyalties. And didn't go to business school, didn't understand consumer packaged goods or marketing or technology, mobile technology. So you can imagine my wife's reaction when I told her I wanted to quit my partnership, take a 5x pay cut, and start a cashback app involving grocery purchases. We've been together a long time, so she stuck with me. But the first part of that conversation was tricky. But we figured out a way to raise money. And you mentioned Foundry didn't invest. Neither did anybody else. So I had about 30-ish funds pass on my seed stage. But that's logical, right? I was a lawyer who was putting none of his own money in, who had never started a company in the space or in any other space in Denver, which at that time was not super helpful, with no team and no prototype, nothing more than a fairly bad PowerPoint. So would you invest in that? I mean, maybe. But what we ended up doing was finding 51 angel investors, accredited investors, and through them we raised $3 million, so like $15,000 or $20,000 at a time. And I used to deposit those checks at the local branch bank at Wells Fargo, and I think they thought I was a drug dealer showing up every day with a $20,000 check. But we did it unconventionally, and it ended up benefiting us in a lot of ways, which we can get into. But that's how I took the plunge. I then met Luke, and the way that happened was his brother, Connor, who helps organize Denver Startup Week, Code, if you know Code, here in town, recruiting agency. He called me and said, we want to build this app. You clearly raised this money and no idea what you're doing and can't build anything, so we can help you out. And I said, well, I don't want to hire an agency. I want to find a full-time partner, and that's when I met Luke Swanson. And that started in the basement of a fire station with one toilet, ultimately for 30 people. It was disgusting. There were no windows. It was a very scrappy time. We used to put a table out in front of our office as people walked to the baseball game and asked them for feedback on a paper prototype of our mobile app. And we went from that to where we are today, and it's been a heck of a ride. So that's how it got started.
That's awesome. So it sounds like there was some grinding involved and some not so glorious moments. 30 people for a single toilet is pretty foul.
And it was a really disgusting toilet. For lots of reasons we don't have to get into, but anyway, keep going.
And so I think, it's helpful, I think, for folks, especially early on, to hear that something that feels so successful and so obvious today and so, frankly, large as a business, it all starts somewhere and that it's hard along the way. And you've talked about it being hard even in the later years. I think there's like sort of a myth that I know it's near and dear to your heart to dispel on what it takes to build a company and just the experience of a founder. And sometimes just knowing other people are going through hard shit and it's not perfect for anybody can be helpful and inspiring and uplifting. And so I'd love you to talk a little bit about what you describe as founder mental health. As I listen to you talk about it, maybe I would call it like mental fitness. And it's really like the resilience that's required to get through the inevitable shitty times of building something from nothing. And so would just love for you to kind of riff on that a little bit, like what it means to you, and then maybe offer some things that you've done over time to really like hone that mental fitness. Maybe you were born with it and you're just an incredibly resilient person. But for people that are looking for tools, how to set up a support system, what kinds of things they should be doing, would love to have you talk a little bit about that.
Thanks. And you're right, this is a topic I care a lot about. In fact, last year at Denver Startup Week, I gave a presentation called The Mental Health of a Startup Founder, which is on YouTube and goes into this for 45 minutes. But the short of it is that when I was starting out, there were way too many people getting up on stage in settings like this, just describing their triumph as if it was inevitable. And sort of, it made me feel like I'm not sure if I can do this. I don't have whatever that person had, a degree here or there, or I don't know how to write code, or I didn't go to business school. And I just felt a lot of self-doubt as a result of the way that was portrayed. It was kind of focused on how much money they made when they sold their company, and I just resolved that I wouldn't be that guy. That I'd be much more honest about what it actually has been like throughout the process. And the reality is, it's not a hockey stick. I could get up here and tell a version of Ibotta that's the brochure version that, oh yeah, we went from the basement of a fire station to largest tech IPO in the state, but in between, it's been, like this, in terms of just a sine curve, maybe with a gentle upward slope. And that process has been very difficult emotionally, and I think hard on your family, hard on you, because the kinds of people who attract investment are often people who don't like letting other people down. They're people who hate to disappoint people, they're perfectionists, they're hard workers, and they don't want the ball to drop. And so there's so many balls in the air that they're dropping all the time. And so every day is kind of like 5 amazing things happen and then 3.5 extremely terrifying things happening. So when people say, how was your day? I don't know how to answer that. It's like, mostly good is my new phrase, right? Because every day still is full of that. And so I think some of the things that I've tried to do is make sure to actively dispel the idea that the founder has all the answers. So there's this founder mode notion, and that's nice. But if you're relying on the founder to build a company into the future, you're only going so far. I believe that companies succeed because they convert a high percentage of the good ideas of their team. And that means you have to make sure the team knows that you're turning to them for good ideas, which means that you can't be the kind of Oracle of Delphi who has all the answers. And if you are, no one believes that. That's not authentic, and people don't want to follow that. So great leadership is not selling people that you really know what you're doing. That's what people who have an imposter syndrome and who are insecure do. What people who are confident do is say, we have a problem, this is what it is, I don't necessarily know what the answer is, I'd really like to hear your thoughts, and then you listen to that, and you incorporate that and try to pursue that, and then you're able to scale the business. I think from a mental health standpoint, the more times you experience near death, I mean, Luke and I have been through at least 15, I don't know how we're getting out of this. There are children here, so I will not use one of my favorite acronyms, but we're effed, it's over is an acronym from the book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. And it's just like that. There are so many times where we've been right up against it, where we thought there was going to be financing and it collapsed the day before, where we thought we were going to get acquired and it collapsed the day before, where we thought Luke and I were in a situation where, I'll tell a brief story, we were maybe like 3 months into the business, maybe a year into the business, and we get this lawsuit, this class action lawsuit under the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. Every text message that you send without that person's permission is a $500 penalty. And I didn't even know what this law was. Keep in mind, I clerked for the Supreme Court, went to law school. You would think this would be a strength. No, never heard of it. So I wander over to Luke's desk and I'm like, just wondering, how many text messages have we sent with Twilio? He's like, what do you mean, total up to this point? Like, yeah, I'm just curious, ballpark. He's like, 4 or 5 million. Okay,
We can do that math.
that's good to know. He's like, why do you ask? No reason. Thankfully we weren't violating the law and we settled the case for $1,000. But I was terrified. And there are many, many, many moments. And when you go through enough of those, it's almost like when you're going through the next one, you forcibly tell yourself that this always resolves itself. And so the way I've done that is I choose a restaurant that I go to every time I'm having this feeling. And that way, by being at that restaurant each and every time, I'm reminded that I've been at this restaurant 4 times. That restaurant is north in Cherry Creek, if you've ever been there. You'll see me, and if you do, just stay away, because it means I'm going through a crisis.
Does the restaurant know that it's your bad day restaurant?
It does not.
Okay.
No, I'd rather keep it that way.
So they just think you're a sad guy.
But I as a sort of person in my generation, didn't grow up thinking it was okay to have a therapist, talk about having a therapist. I started with a coach, which is like a starter therapist for men, I find. And then once I progressed from coaching to therapy, now I rely on it and recommend it to everyone, because you can't just turn to your spouse or your friends to sort of dump anxiety. And there's so much futurism. I mean, if you think about trying to stay in the present moment, it's very hard as an entrepreneur, because your job is to imagine the future and sell people on the future and contemplate future scenarios. So staying present and being appreciative for the present can be really hard. There's a lot more to say on the subject. If you're interested, go to YouTube and type in my name and Startup Mental Health. You'll see the rest of it.
It's definitely worth a watch. As you think about mental health and sort of the things that you do to put yourself in a position, I often say to founders, like, you are the product in many ways. And so, like, you do have to work out and keep your mind strong and kind of be in a position where you can have clarity and make good decisions. And you want, as a company, it's not just you, as you talked about, it's a lot about team. You're a pretty big team today. How do you sort of, by example and by programming or whatever it is, how do you encourage the rest of the people on the team to kind of be at your level from that perspective and sort of share the importance of mental health with them, both today as a massive company with resources where you can do things like pay for therapy, but sort of looking back, was there a point at which you started to introduce those concepts, or do you have ideas for founders for how to think about that in the early days?
Yeah, and to be clear, I have so much therapy I pay for it myself. It goes beyond the plan. But no, I would say that one of the things we do to this day is at the beginning of every senior leadership team meeting with Sunit, with Luke, and my other colleagues, we start by doing one non-work thing. And we go around the room and each person shares one thing that's going on in their life that has nothing to do with work. And that sometimes is nothing more than, here's what I've been up to over the weekend, but sometimes it will be how you're feeling. I just visited with my father. He has Parkinson's. It's tough to watch him with dementia slipping away, and that's been on my mind, and it's affecting me. And it really helps you understand how people are showing up and contextualize how they may come across in a different moment. And it normalizes that behavior, I think, which is really, really helpful to just remember that we're all humans first and equals, and then colleagues second. And I think that talking about these themes, talking about therapy, talking about mental health, talking about some of the techniques for dealing with imposter syndrome at a company-wide all hands, at a town hall. I wrote a letter to our entire company about the importance of taking advantage of the resources that we have. I think I've famously given various presentations on this, sometimes people probably rolling their eyes. We've done different things over the years, but I don't think I did that good of a job of it in the early days, to be honest. And I think I just sort of quietly bore the brunt of it. And then it would bubble over in being kind of combative or defensive in public settings, or just kind of performative in public settings and not as comfortable. And I don't think I was as good of a leader. And I think through learning, through offsites which are facilitated about kind of how you tend to interact in different situations, we at one point created what's called a user's manual, which is like all of your tendencies described. How do you like to communicate? How do people build trust with you? That kind of thing. And it includes your DISC assessment. And so that way we're sort of explicit about how we interact and communicate. Some people like to make decisions in a room in real time. Other people like to be more deliberative, listen, process, come back and share a solution. So it's like creating space for different styles instead of insisting on your style. And for me, a lot of it was just realizing that my own training as a lawyer, the way that law school operates is Socratic method. You get called on and you get 45 minutes of back and forth with the professor in front of everybody. And that's just normal. Well, that's not normal in the business world. And if you ask people in front of a group to defend their ideas or their recommendation, they will sometimes view that as a form of persecution. They don't understand that that is an opportunity and that we care about their ideas. And so starting to understand the wake that you create. When you have 5 employees, it's not much of a wake. When you have 850 employees, when you get really excited about a vision and then go off on vacation, you just set the entire company down a path. And that's not necessarily good. So learning how to function in a way that is more deliberative and scalable is something that at every stage I've had to do.
So this is not something we discussed ahead of time, so
That's fine.
Forgive me.
I didn't get the questions in advance.
So I think there's a tendency today for folks to kind of, like, there's a point at which you get past the, hey, we're creating space for everybody and everybody has a voice and everyone's mental health matters, to like, I need to run a fucking startup and I need everybody to work hard and I need everybody to focus on the job and all of those things, right? And so, that's my kid, so I can do
that's your kid? Oh. Well, why didn't you tell me?
So, like, how have you approached creating some boundaries that I think have really, in some cases, gone away since 2020, and some folks in sort of like the anti-woke side of things want them back in a hard and formal and sort of old school way. And you've got demographic shifts with like Gen Z coming into the workforce. People are isolated. There's just like a lot of stuff going on. And when I talk to founders and CEOs, I think it's just so hard to decide, like, what issues are we cool with people talking about at work or not? What are we going to make a statement about or not? How are we going to create these spaces or not? Are we going to police things or are we not? So, like, what, you've been at this a long time. I think you have a really sort of enlightened view of culture building. What's your take on all of this, and what's been your approach, and maybe mistakes that you've made or things that you've learned?
Yeah, I made a lot of mistakes on this. I think part of it is that you have to separate your personal views from your role as the leader of an organization. And in my case, a public company with investors of all different opinions and employees of all different opinions. And I think when I choose to comment on something in the workplace, I want there to be a very clear nexus to the values of our company. So if we're talking about diversity, inclusivity, et cetera, I will talk about that, even if it is something that's in the headlines. If we're talking about financing health benefits that include reproductive health benefits, no matter what state you're in, I'm going to bring that up if the Supreme Court ruling has seemingly potentially taken that away.
And what's your nexus there?
What's my nexus? Because we provide health benefits through our company.
So there's the, like, what we do for our employees, right, versus what your product is and who your customers are.
We will transport employees across state lines to get the reproductive care they deserve. And we want to make sure that was clear day one, right? But I've also over-rotated on this, as Luke can attest, and sometimes strayed into, it's the difference between you should make sure to take the day off and vote if you want to, and sort of straying into sharing your own views on social issues. And I think it's very tempting. I mean, after George Floyd, a lot of people felt like we really needed to say something publicly. And I'm glad I did, because I thought it might encourage other people to be introspective. What I've learned over the years is that sometimes employees would rather have you do some performative action than do anything themselves to address the underlying problem. And so, that has caused me to be more selective about when I ask them to do that. That was really the case with the Black Lives Matter movement. For instance, we gave our employees a chance to donate their $150 free dinner perk that we give everyone to a Black Lives Matter cause, and we gave them a chance to take a day off to protest or electioneer, do whatever they want on any issue. And almost nobody did either of those things. So for all the Sturm and Drang of, we got to do better, it's like, okay, where's the we part of that, right? But I've also realized that, my mother worked in North Carolina, and she's a liberal who voted for Obama, in a workplace as a nurse where everybody voted for the Republican candidate, and she was mercilessly teased about that. And I've always remembered that as, it's just not okay to make people feel that way. we have a mission at Ibotta, which is to make every purchase rewarding, and that's what we're focused on together. That's our team. And the other thing I've learned is that we're not a family, and there's a lot of emphasis on family in early stage startups. It's very kumbaya, and it's kind of once tribe, always tribe. But if you really want to succeed, you really need to think in a different metaphor, which is we have a mission, we have an objective, a goal. We want our managers to think of themselves as coaches who are helping the players perform at their very best. They're not dad, right? And there's a difference between mom and dad and your coach. And that's really a distinction because, families' blood is thicker than water, can't ever be fired, et cetera. I think we've really, we recentered around our culture having specific values, and then we defined what those were, and then we really tried to exemplify those and then bring those to life in lots of different real ways throughout the year. And if it's just what's written, they say, culture is not what's written on your t-shirts or your wall, it's how your employees feel on Sunday night, right? And so we really try to keep that in mind in the context of what we speak out on and when. But in my personal capacity, I did post on Israel on October 7th. In my personal capacity, I did volunteer to help Mike Johnston get elected. In my personal capacity, I do a lot of things because I view that as part of my civic responsibility, and I don't mind if people see me doing that as long as I'm fine with them doing whatever they want, even if I disagree with them on that issue.
Thank you. That's it's just hard. So I applaud you for caring enough to sort of take an approach. You mentioned culture and talking about values and mission statement, which are awesomely clear and concise today for Ibotta. Talk about the evolution of, first of all, even deciding, hey, we need values and a mission statement that people understand. For folks that are early, is that important early on? What are the exercises you do? Who should really be at the table doing, creating those things versus sort of projecting them to everybody else? Talk a little bit about that over the course of, a brand new startup to now a public company.
Yeah, I don't know if there's only one way to do this. I think if I had it to do again, I would have addressed these topics and taken them more seriously earlier in the life of the business. I think I thought they were kind of soft and let's just get on with building the app, But I think over time, you need to have certain values that you think make you a successful company. And I think, for example, we really believe that if one of our values is, or our values track our name, so integrity, boldness, ownership, teamwork, transparency, and a good idea can come from anywhere. Spells out Ibotta. Our mission statement is make every purchase rewarding. It's 4 words. When we started out, we had a 30-word mission statement that no one knew. The CEO of Whole Foods was in my office interviewing me like this, and he said, do you have a mission statement? And I started to recite the 30 words. And he's like, actually, let's ask the crowd. What's the mission statement? What's the mission statement? And nobody had the same answer. He's like, you don't have a mission statement. I'm like, okay, good point. So we changed it to a 4-word mission statement. So it was more clarifying what we were and what we weren't. But on the values, take a value like a good idea can come from anywhere. If we believe that the companies that win in a competitive environment are those that convert the highest percentage of the good ideas of the team, well, that then implies you need transparency, because without shared context, what's a good idea? I don't know what a good idea might be. Right? So you got to create trust and transparency, even as a public company, and that can be hard. And then from there, you got to create an environment. And as Luke knows, I'm extremely passionate on this topic. It takes so little to deter a non-conventional creative idea. It takes so little. It could be an eye roll. It could be a look at your watch. It could be a look at your phone. It could be, oh, we tried that already. It could be, it is so much more important to look for the merit in an idea. And the more off the wall and unconventional, the better. Because if it were already being done, it would already be done. If it's potentially a great new idea, it's by definition not the conventional wisdom. And so I often liken it to like a band playing. If you go in and you have a song that you think is potentially good and your bandmates want to hear it and you're a little self-conscious and you start singing it and they're like, come on, that's not going to be a hit. The next time you're just that much less likely to share your idea. So I always think about Freddie Mercury coming in and like, all right, I got this idea for an 8-minute long operatic tune called, And God bless Brian May, because he's like, all right, let's hear it. Let's hear it. Go to the piano. Wow, that's cool. What do you want us to do? You want us to sing at 3 levels above falsetto together in unison for... Let's do that. And that's why you have one of the greatest pieces of music of all time, right? And so I really, really, really try to create an environment where it is encouraged and safe for people to speak up with different ideas and then celebrate and attribute the ideas to the people whose ideas they really were. Was there a question here? Did you want to jump in? Yeah. 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 The question is, how did we come up with our values? Was it kind of handed to us? Was it a consultant? Did we do it? We were in our second office one day, and right near Union Station and 17th Street and Wine Coop. And one day after work, the 30 of us in the company all got around, and I had a white paper roll board that I could marker on, and we decided it would track the word Ibotta. And so what were the letters that made sense with that? We all nominated ideas based on what we felt had made the company successful in the first year and a half. And integrity was the first one, because if you can't trust that what somebody says and what they do, whether they're being watched or not, are the same, you have nothing. And I had come from watching my father's company go to a multi-billion-dollar company to a penny stock due to an accounting fraud. Story for another day, but very traumatizing. So integrity was the very heart of that. And then over time, other people tossed other things out. So transparency, teamwork. I tossed out a good idea can come from anywhere, because that was the motto of Fred Bartlett, the founder of the law firm where I was a partner. And I stole that. I just bogarted that from Fred. And so, different people. Somebody said out hustle. We had out hustle for a while. We eventually changed that to ownership, because we didn't think that it should be kind of like a FaceTime hustle thing. So things change, right? We used to have a J.K. Rowling room, and now we don't. We have a Hogwarts room now, because it's important to make sure that your values remain, the values that you want to put out there to the world, and you want to make sure that they are described, with clarity. So we have a culture deck that explains what each of these things means to us in practice, and sort of the hygiene of how we interact with each other. And then we give out awards for people who exemplify this or that value. It's part of our interview and evaluative process. So no, I would never hire a management consultant to tell me about the values of my company. And I generally don't hire management consultants anyway, but that's also a different subject. Jacqueline.
Thank you. Thanks for that question. Do you, in some cases, values get used to be like a thing that you get to point to when there's a point of disagreement or a hard decision to make, and you have sort of two conflicting agendas, and so like having the values there is kind of brings you back to remind you, like, hey, we said that we were going to have high integrity. I don't think launching our product, this, whatever it is. Do you actually have examples of when values get used in conversation as a team, or in decision making, or in talking to customers?
Oh yeah. You could pick any one of the values. So for example, integrity, we have many times debated whether we should allow promotion of tobacco products. It's probably tens of millions of dollars that we've left on the table by saying no to that. And we've thought about it, and it's a really interesting question. Like, is it up to us to decide that? Is it a free market? What if one of our partners wants to do it? One of our retail partners wants to do it? Where do we draw that line? Should it not be on our app? That's guided by a sense of that. I think also I have looked back at the way that we've sold and gone to market at certain times and felt like we weren't sort of being upfront about how we were going to measure the success of what we were doing. And since that was kind of a bit of a moving target, I felt like that wasn't operating with the highest integrity, and that was a big reason why we stopped doing that. You look at the other values, transparency. As a public company, it's very tempting. I mean, insider trading, oh my God. So let's not tell anybody anything, because then they could trade the stock and there'd be insider trading. No, we're a transparent company. I think I've actually said to my employees, listen to our general counsel, understand the rules. If you go to jail, I'm not bailing you out. right? This is on you. You are in possession of material non-public information, and you go home and talk about it with your partner, and they trade the stock. I can't help you, right? But we're not going to change the way we operate. And this is something I got from Netflix. That's really how they handle their IPO. That's another example that's more recent. But I think when you go through a transformation like going public, a lot of people are looking to see, is this still the same place? Is this still the same values? Are we going to, I mean, today we just had a 6-hour, unbelievably fun, like group brainstorm. And a good idea can come from anywhere was very well embodied today. I mean, everybody but 3 people in that room spoke. And I was just writing ideas down on the whiteboard, and that was exhilarating. It wasn't the founders here to tell you what the next big thing is, write it down. It was nothing like that. And that's the key to our strength. I really think that those values are embodied in choices we make.
Awesome. So many follow-ups there, but we're running out on time, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the fact that you built this company in Denver, Colorado, which in 2012 was certainly not the hottest market, and which today, despite headlines of how awesome it is here and so much talent here, is still sort of considered, like, I hate this tier concept, but like a second or third tier market, right? It's not San Francisco, it's not New York. I think you moved here not because you were like, this is a great place to build a company, but because you wanted to live in a place like Colorado. And I think that's what attracts a lot of people here. Has your mind shifted, having now over 12 years built a company, that this is a great place for founders, not just because there are, how many 14ers have you climbed? 58?
All of them.
58, all the 14ers. But that there's actually something else that's special about this place and is somewhere people should really consider to build a company, to be investing. So talk about maybe that shift a little bit. And then also, what does Colorado need going forward to continue to be a leader in tech, in startups, and to be a place where people want to come and build?
Yeah, so I think it's true that in the early days of Ibotta, there was this concept of Denver as a sort of backwater. I often got questions like, shouldn't you be based in Boulder? Or, are you going to be able to hire any engineers out there? I mean, I got that a lot in 2012. I would say the tier thing has kind of gone out the window since the pandemic, especially. So many people are working remotely. I mean, one strength of our company is that we do hybrid work. And 46% or something like that, 46 different states where we have employees. So yeah, we're in Denver. We have 400 people in Denver. We also have, 850 employees. And I think that that's been valuable. I do want us to become focused on rebuilding in Denver with new hires, but we also have allowances for hiring the right person wherever they happen to be. You can work from a variety of different places and be successful. So there's that. I think there's also the fact that capital is much less lazy now. So I don't care where you're based, they'll find you at the great venture capital firms or the great growth funds or the private equity funds, or if you're going public, they're not like, ooh, from Denver, I don't know. It's more like, let me see your financial statements, And so I think it matters less. I actually think that San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, the bloom is off the rose in those communities. It's dangerous to live downtown and operate downtown. It's expensive. There are, they call San Francisco the childless city because there's so few children because it's so expensive to live there, or public schools are so bad downtown. We've all had the experiences of that I'm talking about, and I think these days, people would rather live in a place like this. And so there's so many examples of really talented people who could be anywhere who are here. Seth Sternberg, who just moved here from California, Amal Deshpande, who just moved here from California, who's world class, and they say, well, gosh, the tax rate is a third of what it is in California. We can have access to our leaders. People are accessible and come to events like this and are down to earth. Like, it's better, and so I do think it's better. As far as what it needs to continue to do, I'm very involved in the community in various ways. One of the things I'm working on right now with the governor and the attorney general is reforming the AI bill that was just passed by our state legislature.
Give that a round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's important to regulate artificial intelligence, but it's also really important to get input from the community that actually practices artificial intelligence. And when you broadly define it to include all software, And when you then impose affirmative disclosure requirements on companies more than 50 employees, it's like regulating the internet one state at a time in 1995. It's not a best practice, and we're going to fix that. So we can't screw up with things like that. I also think it's really, really important that we continue to be supportive of each other as companies, and I think we did that during COVID. I hosted a gathering every Monday for a year and a half for business leaders during COVID on Zoom, and that was a way that we stayed connected to each other and just rooting for each other to a degree that you maybe don't see in other markets. Culturally is something that happens with events like this, which is really important. So those are some things that I think I'd like to see us keep doing.
Yeah.
Affordable housing needs to be fixed. I'm a big supporter of this new ballot initiative because our biggest problem as an employer is a lack of affordable housing for employees. It's hard to ask them to come live in Denver when they can't live where they work.
Yeah. And I think another exciting thing is when companies like Ibotta have major success and have 800 employees, 400 of whom are here, the hope is that some folks decide like, hey, I have a problem that I experienced that I want to solve, and go start a company. And so I think the positive thing about some of these outcomes is not just the capital returned to investors, many of whom were in Colorado, but also just kind of like the spawning of the next thing. So sort of thank you for doing that for the Colorado community. Let's open it up to some questions. We've got a question right here.
Yes, sir.
Oh, go ahead and stand up and say your name.
Yeah, it's Rick Ray. Hey, I was wanting to find out, how did you get into a relationship with Coke?
Coke Industries or Coca-Cola?
No, Industries.
Industries. So our largest investor before we went public was KDT, Coke Disruptive Technologies. And they have been an absolutely phenomenal partner. They're the second largest private company in the United States, spin off $1 billion of free cash flow every few weeks. They're doing something right. And they are operators. And I wanted to work with people that have actually operated a company because it's so refreshing as an entrepreneur. I got introduced to Charles and his son Chase by Larry Sonsini, who's on our board of directors. Larry took Apple and Google and Facebook public. He's sort of the godfather of the legal community of Silicon Valley. He's a family friend, and he was our first investor and the first person I talked to about this idea back in 2011. And he's been on our board and advising me ever since. And I think he has a house in Palm Desert or something with one of those guys. Anyway, it's personal relationship, personal introduction. And I went to Wichita, Kansas, and I explained our vision, and we hit it off. And next thing you knew, they invested $250 million in our company. And I'm grateful that they did, because if they didn't, we might not be around, honestly. And I also say that even though I've mentioned my politics a few times on this panel, it's super important to be able to get along and work with people who you disagree with on certain issues. Charles Koch and I don't agree on everything. We agree on criminal justice reform. We don't agree on environmental regulation. And yeah, he's a libertarian. Good for him. The biggest partner I have is John Furner at Walmart. We don't talk about religion or politics. But we get along, and we have a similar mission. I think it's so important, and we're so bad at that in society right now, and sort of engaging and having dialogue without making it personal. I think if you can practice that, you're going to be more successful in business.
Was Chase involved very much?
Chase was involved, yeah. He ran KDT, and now he stepped back, and Byron Knight, who was the person who really sponsored the investment in Ibotta, is the COO there, and he's phenomenal. He's terrific, yeah.
Thanks. Let's go to another question. Yeah, right here.
I turned it off on myself. Hi. My name is Shreya, and I had a question for you. So as a consumer founder, right, in the B2C world, I wonder how you navigated that, considering there's everybody tells you don't go into consumer, it's so hard. I wanted to know what your perspective on that is, and if that environment has changed from 2020 onwards or post-pandemic.
Yeah, everybody will tell you that everything is hard, because it is hard. And one out of, I don't know how many thousand companies, is still there 10 years later. The thing about consumer is that and it depends if you're doing an app or you're making a consumer packaged good, these are totally different. What's your product? Is it an app? A marketplace. Yeah, so in multi-sided markets, it can be challenging to get them off the ground. Cost of consumer acquisition is really a concern. As you get beyond early adopters, you get kind of inflation in your CAC. You'll endlessly be forced to answer the question, what's your LTV to CAC ratio? What's your payback period? Let me see your cohort data. But every business model has problems. You know, Sunit, he was in a business called Level 3. He ran that business. You may have heard of it. You know, they had lots of debt, right? And they had to figure out how to manage through that. We don't have debt. You know, we don't have a supply chain. We don't have to source things from China or worry about our intellectual property getting ripped off. But I will say that we've moved from just being a consumer business to sort of B2B enterprise where we power Walmart's loyalty program and we power life is way less stressful now. A third of our business is our consumer business. It's really an important strategic part of our business. And it's a diversified portfolio where we're not having to sweat acquiring every user ourselves. And that's really nice. I will say that some of the most high value companies are consumer companies. So if you can become, you know, Facebook or Alibaba or TikTok, or awesome. You know, so it's sort of high beta, but it's high reward. And I personally think it's really awesome to be able to describe your product. I mean, there's so many boring B2B SaaS companies where you're like, I make a software that helps. You know, okay, you know, I'm sure it helps somebody. Versus like, this is the app that has paid people $2 billion in cashbacks on their everyday purchases. And right now, there's somebody using that money to pay for their medical bills, their rent, their food, you know, their educational debt, and we're super proud of that. And you should go check it out this weekend. Like when you're at a barbecue, that's just fun. When you're like, well, I'm an international arbitration lawyer, but I'm actually focused on mining arbitrations, mostly UNCITRAL. You know, like what? That's very abstract, right? So I loved having a consumer with consumer ratings and reviews and feedback. And I, you know, B2B's got its own challenges, right? But as you get closer to being a public company, predictable growth and predictable revenue are important. So one way or another, you got to figure that out, because if you're super variable, you know, or you're subject to SEO variations and Google changes the algorithm and you're retail me not, you could lose half or a third, you know, go to a third of your market cap in a day. So you do need to think about what stage you're in terms of the pros and cons of that. But yeah, good luck.
Sometimes in the early days with consumer, it's all about like some kind of distribution hack or distribution advantage. Yeah. Did you come upon that at some point in Ibotta on the consumer side? Yeah,
we came up with some cool stuff like this free Thanksgiving program we did. It was a brilliant idea of our CMO. We give away 3 million free Thanksgiving meals every year. And you'd be like, that doesn't sound like a very good, I mean, great for you, but not a great business choice. Actually, it turns out that the amount of free media that we got, I mean, we were the #2 most Googled term of all terms on Google, free Thanksgiving, Ibotta, was so high. We were on all the Good Morning America, the Today Show, and the amount of other offers that people went in and redeemed alongside, that program paid back in 90 days, which is a phenomenal payback for a consumer business. So we had to get creative around owning certain moments in different ways. I mean, you look at Liquid Death, I'm an investor in that company. They've acquired, Brilliant. I don't know how many customers because of their brand. And the way that Mike Cesario thinks about that business is the way that an SNL skit writer sits around a table with other SNL skit writers thinking about what's funny and what will capture the zeitgeist and go viral. And that's awesome. Right? He's not sitting there like, oh, let me put this creative out on Facebook. No, they're buying a Harrier jet in Arizona, like for real, and then raffling it off and being like, remember when Pepsi said they were going to but didn't? We're actually doing it. I mean, it's that stuff that I love. And so I'm an investor because I'm inspired and I learn things from people like Mike.
That's awesome. It seems like you get to have fun with it. I think we have time for one more. Right here.
Oh, wait, I'll get you. Introduce yourself.
Michael. Oh, very loud. On the flip side of that, because I'm working in B2B and retail, ad tech as well, sales cycle is very different. Makes you want to bash your head against the wall with tubas, right? Like massively large companies that move super slow. How do you get those first customers that are critical?
Yeah, I'll tell you a story. We weren't getting enough offers in our app, and we knew we were going to die because consumers need a certain number of offers to come back, and so the churn was too high. So we needed to stimulate usage, and so we decided to self-fund hundreds of offers out of our own money. We just picked up the image off of a licensed copyrighted database and started throwing it in there, 25 cents back, 50 cents back. We started getting inbound calls from these companies. Like, what is going on? I don't recall authorizing a program with you. In fact, the CMO who I just mentioned, the free Thanksgiving, he was a brand manager for Classico at Heinz. And he calls up and he's like, who are you guys? And what are you doing messing up my trade calendar and like my promotional strategy? And we're like, well, you know, we just, there's no rule against it. It's completely legal because we're using copyrighted licensed image from this Gladstone database. And, you know, we've been just driving sales of your product for free for you. Would you like to see the results? And very often that resulted in them becoming clients. We call it the WTF to RFP, we used to call it. So, and actually we got our CMO out of it too. So sometimes you have to just kind of find a way to kind of get their attention any way you can, right? And then prove to them by giving them, you know, maybe they try it for free or you show them the results. But it's tough. I mean, it is tough. One of the best parts about going public is people will respond to you. Hey, I'm Brian, I'm running a public company, you know, ticker, IBTA, blah, 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 blah. Response rate's like 3 times higher than it was 6 months ago. It's so great. There's many bad things about running a public company. That's one of the best ones. And you start to get meetings with like the CMO of Coca-Cola or the CMO of Pepsi, and that's awesome. But it's been 12 years of knocking on the door, I mean, and getting just shut down. So much rejection, I mean, so much. I'll just end with this since he's here tonight. Reid Hoffman was on the same scholarship that I was on, and my friends implored me to go pitch him early in the days of Ibotta. It was then called Zing, and we didn't have any investors, and I was out in Silicon Valley, and I wrote him, and he said, no, I don't want to meet with you, I'm not interested. And I had this kind of romantic vision, like, all right, no doesn't mean really no. Like, I'm gonna call his assistant, we're gonna build a friendship, and I'm gonna sit in the lobby, like right outside his office, right on Sand Hill Road until, you know, the magic happens. Like, we talk, he's like, wow, yeah, and then he invests. And I'm here to tell you that is not how it went down. How it went down is I showed up in the lobby, and I sat there for 5 hours, and he slipped out the back door and never talked to me. And then 2 years later, Luke and I went up to him at a podium at this conference at Stanford, and we're like, hey, Mr. Hoffman. And he's like, oh, sorry, I invested in blah, 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 Foursquare or whatever. We're like, or what was it called? Shopkick. Some. We're like, oh, that's a bummer. And now I just give him endless shit about it, you know, because he could have invested at 74 cents a share, you know, but that's the way it goes, right? Get used to it, and later on, it'll be that much more satisfying. I often say like that the more you are around for the early days, the more it means to you when you turn the corner. And being in New York with Luke and Rich and these guys, like I cannot tell you what that dinner felt like that night. You know, the feeling of accomplishment and feeling of how much we'd overcome. You know, they often say the best measure of a leader is not how, you know, the stock or the revenue, it's what they've overcome, right? So the best pilot isn't the one who has the least turbulence. It's the person who knows how to respond to situations on the Hudson and land the plane safely, right? And you get a lot of practice at that. So try to turn that into kind of, this is part of, the pain now is part of the happiness then, and stay sane, and good luck.
I think you created a new doctrine, which is the WTF to RFP.
Yeah, try it.
A lot of companies are going to be getting some interesting inbound. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Yeah, it was fun.
Thanks to the audience.